Amber Daniels was the kind of person whose presence lit up a room, even if life often dimmed her opportunities. At 29 years old, she carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, now heavier with the life growing inside her. Amber's caramel brown skin glowed with the unmistakable radiance of pregnancy, her dark, curly hair always styled neatly despite her early mornings. She stood at 5 feet 6 inches, her posture a mix of confidence and caution, reflecting both her resilience and the countless times life had tested her. Amber worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Chicago. She was meticulous, resourceful, and driven, qualities that had earned her respect from coworkers but little acknowledgement from her boss, Ethan Barnes. Amber had always been someone who believed in hard work and fairness, values instilled in her by her late mother. But deep down, she often wrestled with insecurities. The whispered gossip about her pregnancy, subtle looks of disdain, and being overlooked for a promotion despite her qualifications sometimes made her question her worth. Her pregnancy wasn't planned, but it wasn't unwelcome. She envisioned a future where she and her baby, a boy she already named Elijah, would thrive. This was the anchor of her strength, even as systemic hurdles and microaggressions at work chipped away at her self-esteem. Amber's morning started at 5:30 a.m., when the city was just beginning to stir. She brewed a cup of herbal tea, her hand instinctively resting on her growing belly as she glanced over her to-do list for the day. After a quick breakfast, she dressed in her professional yet budget-friendly attire, carefully chosen to mask her expanding figure. Her commute on the crowded L train was a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. She often used this time to meditate or draft emails for work. By 8 a.m., she was at her desk, ready to tackle the day. Amber's tasks varied, from organizing meetings to preparing reports. Despite her efficiency, she couldn't help but notice the subtle dismissals from Ethan. He'd glance at her bulging belly and sigh, as if her pregnancy were an inconvenience rather than a celebration of life. Lunch breaks were her solace, often spent with a few friendly coworkers who empathized with her struggles. They were her sounding board, a reminder that she wasn't alone in navigating workplace biases. By 5 p.m., Amber would head home, exhausted but proud of her ability to balance it all, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against her. The office was a blend of modern sleekness and corporate sterility. Glass wall-separated departments, creating the illusion of transparency while emphasizing the rigid hierarchy. The tech company's open floor plan was dotted with workstations, each adorned with personalized items, except Amber's, which remained bare due to her constant workload. Ethan Barnes, the company's VP of operations, had an office that overlooked the entire floor. A middle-aged white man with a sharp suit and sharper words, Ethan embodied corporate ambition and entitlement. His voice carried an undertone of superiority, often leaving Amber feeling diminished during their interactions. Though Amber worked hard to maintain professionalism, the office environment wasn't always welcoming. Meetings often felt like a stage where she was a supporting character at best, her ideas glossed over in favor of others. Her colleagues were polite, but rarely engaging beyond pleasantries, a silence that spoke volumes. The break room, where casual camaraderie thrived, was another space where Amber felt excluded. Conversations about promotions, weekend plans, or office politics rarely included her. Yet Amber remained determined to make her mark, refusing to let the unspoken biases deter her. Amber could sense the shifting dynamics. Ethan's curt emails, the reduction of her responsibilities, and the way his gaze lingered disapprovingly on her belly hinted at an unspoken tension. It wasn't the first time she had faced prejudice, but the stakes felt higher now, with Elijah's future intertwined with hers. A particularly uncomfortable moment occurred during a team meeting when Ethan dismissed her suggestion outright, only to approve it later when a male colleague repeated it. Amber's fist clenched under the table, her resolve to prove her worth intensifying. The final straw came when she overheard Ethan talking to HR. Though she couldn't catch every word, phrases like performance slipping and not a good fit sent a chill down her spine. Amber knew trouble was brewing, but she wasn't prepared for how quickly it would escalate. It was a Friday morning, unusually quiet in the office. Amber had just finished preparing a detailed report for an upcoming client meeting when Ethan's assistant approached her desk. "Amber, Mr. Barnes wants to see you in his office," the assistant said, her voice low and almost sympathetic. Amber's heart sank. The way the assistant avoided eye contact hinted that this wasn't a routine check-in. She grabbed her notepad and walked towards Ethan's glass-walled office, each step echoing the dread building within her. Ethan was seated behind his massive oak desk, his fingers steepled in what seemed like rehearsed seriousness. He motioned for her to sit, but didn't meet her eyes. "Amber," he began, his tone clipped and devoid of warmth, "we need to have a difficult conversation." Her palms grew sweaty as she nodded, bracing herself. "After reviewing your recent performance," Ethan continued, "it's clear that you've been unable to meet the standards we expect at this company. I understand your personal circumstances, but this role requires someone who can give it their full attention." Amber's mouth went dry. "My personal circumstances," she echoed, her voice trembling. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Your pregnancy has clearly affected your focus and productivity. It's not a good fit anymore. Today will be your last day." For a moment, Amber couldn't breathe. Her mind raced as she tried to process the words. She had always met deadlines, juggled multiple tasks, and even covered for others without complaint. This couldn't be happening, not now, not when she needed this job the most. "I've given everything to this role," she finally said, her voice cracking. "This isn't fair." Ethan's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, Amber. HR will provide the necessary paperwork. Please pack up your things." Amber left Ethan's office in a daze. She returned to her desk, her vision blurred by unshed tears. Co-workers avoided her gaze, sensing the weight of what had just occurred. Her hands shook as she began gathering her belongings, each item a reminder of her dedication to a company that had discarded her so callously. In the solitude of the elevator, her emotions erupted. Tears streamed down her face as anger, fear, and despair collided within her. How could they do this? Didn't they understand the challenges she already faced as a single, expectant mother? Amber's mind spiraled with questions and fears. How would she pay rent? What about the prenatal care she had meticulously budgeted for? And what message did this send to her unborn son about the world he was about to enter? She wanted to scream, to demand justice, but at that moment all she felt was exhaustion. The fight seemed insurmountable, the odds too steep. Yet, beneath the despair, a small flame of defiance flickered. She wouldn't let this define her. That evening, Amber sat in her small apartment, surrounded by the boxes she had packed from her desk. The apartment felt heavier, the walls closing in as the reality of her situation settled in. She glanced at the ultrasound photo pinned to her fridge, her son's tiny form a reminder of what was at stake. Her once structured routine was now in disarray. No alarm to set for the next morning, no tasks waiting in her inbox. The absence of purpose was both liberating and suffocating. Amber spent hours recalculating her budget, trimming expenses, and searching for remote jobs that could accommodate her pregnancy. Every job listing seemed to mock her with impossible demands. The uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud, but she refused to crumble. Her evenings, once filled with planning for Elijah's arrival, were now consumed by anxiety. Yet each kick from her unborn son reminded her why she needed to persevere. This wasn't just about her. It was about building a future where he wouldn't face the same injustices. Amber resolved to fight back, though she didn't yet know how. Ethan might have underestimated her, but he had lit a fire that wouldn't easily be extinguished. Amber's resolve solidified the moment she stepped into her apartment and began researching her rights. Her initial search led her to articles and forums filled with stories eerily similar to her own. Discrimination against pregnant employees was illegal, but proving it was a different battle altogether. The next morning, Amber contacted a legal aid organization that specialized in workplace discrimination cases. A compassionate paralegal named Sophia walked her through the process. "It's not going to be easy," Sophia warned. "But if you're willing to fight, we can build a case." Amber filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. The paperwork was daunting: filled with legal jargon that made her second-guess herself at every turn. Yet, with Sophia's guidance, she documented everything. Emails from Ethan, performance reviews, and even the recent meeting where her idea had been dismissed only to be accepted later under another colleague's name. Word of her complaints spread quickly in the office. Former coworkers reached out, some offering quiet support while others distanced themselves. Amber faced subtle backlash, whispered gossip, snide remarks on social media, and even an anonymous message accusing her of playing the victim card. Despite the hostility, Amber pressed on. She began gathering evidence, including testimonies from former employees who had experienced similar mistreatment. Patterns of bias and unethical behavior under Ethan's leadership began to emerge, fueling her determination. Amber's fight wasn't solitary. Sophia became her guide through the legal labyrinth, offering both expertise and encouragement. "You're stronger than you think, Amber," Sophia said during one particularly tough day. A surprising ally emerged in Marcus, a former coworker who had left the company 6 months earlier. Marcus revealed that he, too, had faced Ethan's condescension, albeit for different reasons. "He's been untouchable for years," Marcus said, "but maybe it's time someone held him accountable." Amber's best friend, Layla, was another pillar of support. Layla was a force of positivity, always reminding Amber of her worth. "Elijah's going to be so proud of you," Layla said one evening. "You're showing him how to stand up for what's right before he's even born." Together, this small but unwavering team gave Amber the strength she needed to keep going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Amber's nights were the hardest. Alone in her small apartment, the weight of the fight often felt unbearable. The memories of her mother, who had raised her to believe in fairness and justice, clashed with the harsh realities she now faced. "What if I fail?" she whispered into the quiet, her hand resting on her belly. Elijah's gentle kicks were her only answer. The uncertainty gnawed at her. What if the case dragged on for months, or even years? What if she couldn't prove Ethan's bias? And what if potential employers labeled her as a troublemaker, making it even harder to provide for her son? Her mind drifted back to her childhood, where she had witnessed her mother fight similar battles. The nights when bills piled up, but her mother refused to compromise her dignity, left an indelible mark on Amber. This wasn't just about her and Elijah. It was about breaking a cycle and paving a path for others. Her fear transformed into anger, not the destructive kind, but the focused, determined kind that fueled action. Ethan's arrogance, his blatant disregard for fairness, and his belief that he could get away with it all fanned the flames of her resolve. Amber began to see her fight not as an uphill battle, but as a necessary stand. She wasn't just fighting for her livelihood. She was fighting for her son's future, her mother's legacy, and for every woman who had ever been silenced. As the weeks passed, cracks began to show in Ethan's fortress. A former HR employee contacted Amber anonymously, offering key documents that hinted at Ethan's unethical practices. Internal memos revealed that Amber's firing had been premeditated, with discussions framing her pregnancy as a liability. Amber and Sophia began preparing for mediation. Meanwhile, Marcus connected her with a journalist interested in covering workplace discrimination cases. The possibility of public exposure added a new dimension to the conflict, one Ethan wouldn't be able to control. The tension escalated when Amber received a cease and desist letter from Ethan's legal team, a clear attempt to intimidate her. But instead of backing down, Amber saw it as confirmation that she was on the right path. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only test Amber's resolve, but also bring Ethan's actions into the spotlight. The day of the mediation finally arrived. Amber sat across the table from Ethan in a sterile conference room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sophia was beside her, a picture of calm professionalism, while Ethan's high-priced lawyer exuded an air of smug confidence. The mediator began the session with pleasantries, but the atmosphere was tense. Ethan avoided Amber's gaze, focusing instead on a stack of documents in front of him. Sophia began her presentation by laying out the timeline of events and presenting Amber's performance reviews, all of which were glowing. She then moved on to the internal emails Amber had received from the anonymous HR whistleblower. "Here's an email from Mr. Barnes, dated 2 weeks before Amber was fired. Sophia said, her voice steady but firm. She slid a printed copy across the table. In it, he refers to her pregnancy as a distraction and suggests terminating her employment before her maternity leave becomes an issue. Ethan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Ethan remained impassive. Sophia didn't stop there. She revealed additional memos and testimonies from other employees, painting a clear picture of a pattern of discrimination under Ethan's leadership. The mediator's neutral expression began to crack as the evidence piled up. Finally, Sophia concluded, the evidence is irrefutable. This was not a matter of performance. It was blatant discrimination. For the first time, Ethan spoke. This is ridiculous. He snapped, his voice tight. Amber was simply not up to the task, but his words rang hollow against the mountain of evidence before him. As the session progressed, there was an unexpected knock on the door. A representative from the company's board of directors entered, accompanied by a corporate attorney. Their presence was a shock to everyone, including Ethan. Mr. Barnes, the board representative began, we've been reviewing the evidence submitted as part of this mediation, and it aligns with complaints we've received from other employees. Ethan's face turned pale. The board member continued, this isn't just about Amber's case. It's about a culture of bias and unethical behavior under your leadership. Effective immediately. You're suspended pending further investigation. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Ethan's arrogance crumbled as he sputtered in protest, but the weight of his actions had finally caught up to him. Word spread quickly. Within hours, Amber's story began to gain traction online. The journalist Marcus had connected her with published a detailed expose, highlighting not just her case, but the broader implications of systemic discrimination in corporate culture. The story went viral, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Social media lit up with messages of support for Amber, and the company faced immense public pressure to make sweeping changes. Amber watched the events unfold with a mix of disbelief and relief. The woman who had once doubted her ability to fight back was now the center of a movement for workplace justice. As the news spread, Amber felt an overwhelming sense of vindication. She had stood up not just for herself, but for every employee who had ever been silenced or marginalized. That evening, as she sat in her apartment surrounded by messages of support, Amber allowed herself a moment to breathe. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the reassuring kicks of her son. "We did it, Elijah," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We proved that we're stronger than they thought." Her gratitude extended to her allies, Sophia, Marcus, Layla, and even the anonymous whistleblower who had risked their own position to help her. Their support had been a lifeline, reminding her that she wasn't alone in her fight. The fear and doubt that had once consumed her were replaced by a quiet confidence. Amber knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she had the strength to navigate it. In her triumph, she resolved to use her experience to advocate for others. Her fight wasn't over, it was just beginning. In the months that followed, Amber focused on rebuilding her life. The legal settlement she received from the company, though not life-changing, provided a cushion to support her and Elijah as she charted a new path. Amber used the time to reconnect with herself. She started attending prenatal yoga classes and joined a support group for working mothers who had faced workplace discrimination. The shared stories of resilience and recovery strengthened her resolve and made her realize she wasn't alone. She also began freelance consulting, offering diversity and inclusion training to small businesses. The work was fulfilling, allowing her to use her experience to prevent others from facing similar challenges. Slowly but surely, Amber's confidence returned. Her voice, once stifled by fear and doubt, became her strongest asset. She started speaking at workshops and conferences, sharing her story and advocating for workplace equity. Each time she stood before an audience, she felt a little stronger, a little more whole. Amber's relationships flourished in her newfound stability. Layla became her business partner, helping her expand her consulting services. Together, they envisioned a future where their work would inspire lasting change. Marcus, ever the loyal friend, introduced Amber to a network of professionals passionate about workplace reform. His unwavering support reminded her of the importance of allies in the fight for justice. Amber also mended strained relationships with her extended family, who had once doubted her decision to take on a corporate giant. "You've always been brave," her aunt said during a family gathering, "but now you're unstoppable." Professionally, Amber's work began to attract attention. She received an offer to collaborate with a national nonprofit dedicated to workplace equity, a testament to the impact of her efforts. Through these changes, Amber grew not just as a professional, but as a person. The adversity she faced had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more empathetic. One quiet evening, Amber sat in her rocking chair, holding Elijah in her arms. He was just a few weeks old, his tiny fingers curled around hers. As she gazed at him, memories of her journey flooded her mind. The fear, the fight, the triumph. She realized that every step, no matter how painful, had led to this moment. "You're my reason, little one," she whispered, her voice steady with emotion. "You taught me how to fight, even before you were here." Amber reflected on the lessons she had learned, the power of resilience, the importance of allies, and the necessity of standing up for what's right. She knew her story wasn't just hers. It was a testament to the strength of countless others who dared to challenge injustice. As dawn broke, light spilled through the window, bathing the room in a warm glow. Elijah stirred in her arms, his soft coos filling the silence. Amber smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. She carried Elijah to the window, showing him the world outside. "This is your future," she said softly. "A future where you'll know your worth and never let anyone take it from you." In that moment, Amber felt a sense of closure. The battle she had fought had not only secured her place in the world, but had also paved the way for a brighter future. For herself, her son, and others like them. Amber kissed Elijah's forehead and turned to face the day ahead. She knew challenges would come, but she also knew she was ready to face them, armed with the strength of her story and the promise of a better tomorrow. Amber's journey reminds us of the power of resilience and the importance of standing up against injustice. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more narratives of courage and transformation. Together, let's create a world where fairness and equality thrive.